figures have, said, oh, if we're elected or in power, there will be no central bank digital currency. But are they against, JP Morgan issuing, deposit tokens or stable coins that are just as programmable and surveillable as what, the central bank could issue? And is that really any better for prosperity and liberty of Americans? Is it better to be surveilled by Wall Street and have them program your money than it is to have the Fed? Quite frankly, not, especially when you consider that people like Jamie Dimon, for example, have come out on record saying they think private property should be seized in order to meet, UN climate goals and things of that nature. It's really ultimately the same thing at the end of the day. And so I think we're going to see, various efforts to try and herd people into the same system. But in order to have that happen, they have to convince people that the initiatives they're supporting are actually against this control grid to an extent, by giving it different names and different appearances. But ultimately, it's fundamentally the same.
You mentioned a while ago that one of the things they fear is sort of the uncontained chaos of individual humans having a point of view and not doing exactly what they want them to do at all times. Mm-hmm. And I was really surprised by, if we could, I like my fractal metaphor, to trust them and punish us when we don't seem to trust them enough. But I don't think they're going to be able to rebuild trust. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so with the current establishment, but this is what I worry about in terms of what I mentioned earlier, when with figures that they have framed increasingly as anti-establishment, that when push comes to shove, when push comes to shove, they end up serving the establishment anyway. So, Trump, I think, sort of falls in that category. In the sense that his campaign rhetoric in, the 2016 election and how he ended up governing, there are drastic differences there. And I think the same is true for his rhetoric this time and what is likely to happen if and when he returns to the White House. People seem to have forgotten his defense and role in things like Operation Warp Speed. And he has not come clean about that, or his role in, early lockdowns, mandates, how his administration created a pre-crime program at the Department of Justice called DEEP that was later weaponized against his own supporters and will likely be weaponized against his supporters in the future. Him putting people like John Bolton in as national security advisors after campaigning on being an anti-neocon. Being framed by his supporters as not having started any new wars, but there were several attempts to do coups in places like Venezuela and elsewhere, which obviously is not going to survive, which were financial markets. Jeffrey Epstein was not a career sex blackmailer, though those have existed in U.S. history. Jeffrey Epstein was really more of a career financial terrorist and tax fraudster, and involved in a lot of insane financial crime and money laundering, allegedly for banks in the 80s that included BCCI. While he was at Bear Stearns in the late 70s and early 80s, he was involved with the power elite and tax schemes, some of which eventually got him fired from there, but he continued his business links and sort of became intimately involved in the world of shadow banking. His main patron, Leslie Wexner, in the late 80s was very involved with Bank One, which later, after some mergers became JP Morgan. And obviously the world around Wexner and some of his close associates, who were also business associates of Jeffrey Epstein, are responsible for Jamie Dimon being head of JP Morgan, which I think is part of where the JP Morgan Epstein relationship comes from, and part of the reason I think they wanted to settle that case and not have it go to trial, among other things. So, Jeffrey Epstein, and you can look this up because there's been stories written about it, also had a very unusual role in the collapse of Bear Stearns in 2008, which some people have described as an execution of that bank. And it was really, is obviously related to pursuing those ends over the next several decades. And a big key theme that PSAR outlined to Congress about this was the idea of technology transfer, doing big technology transfers from the West to the East in order to sort of economically equalize and redistribute things. And if you look at Maxwell and PSAR, and also Epstein's involvement with the Clinton White House as part of the Chinagate scandal, tech transfers have been going on for a very long time. And this particular nexus has a outsized influence over the deep state of Israel, which is often used the special relationship it has with the US in terms of military technology to acquire that technology and then pass it off to China and adversary nations of the United States. And this is a documented thing. You even had the CIA raise concerns about it in the early 90s, pre-Chinagate and all of this, but really it got out of control at a certain point. And then you have, all these efforts to outsource American industry to these same countries to create this global system of interdependence that's essentially managed by these interconnected economic entities that are running the world. And in the banks in terms of, destabilizing urban centers and, just destabilization in general. That way the state can come in and offer various solutions, whether it's digital ID or really whatever they want to stabilize. And that could be things from increased police state behavior. It could really include a lot of different things. But I think digital ID is going to be a big part of it. And I think, sort of this banking the unbanked financial, making this global interoperable cross-border finance system, of which CBDCs are a big part, but definitely not the only part. And, the BIS going through these CBDC trials, multi-CBDC trials and all of this, it's all about building this global system of interoperable CBDCs and also, their private sector equivalents like deposit tokens and stable coins to be, sort of traded at mass and then, surveillable and also programmable probably. So they, directly intersect with things like carbon markets and all of the stuff that is being developed, in tandem with all of this. So, definitely, I think the migration issue ties in with all of those things. And probably some more. I mean, if I were to think more, be very grounded. And I think, by having that fluidity sort of programmed into some of these younger generations, the powers that be can manipulate them more easily from one side to the other. And they're not necessarily firmly anchored in a set of values or even, labels or whatever about themselves, that it's all subject to change, which makes, them more easily guided one way or the other, or herded maybe is the better word, by these power elite figures that have spent decades and decades and funded a litany of psychologists to, weaponize this stuff against us, frankly.
Yeah, I read as much as I could stomach of Kissinger's 58 PhD thesis. And in there, he discusses why revolutions succeed. And they succeed because the revolutionaries push so fast, so far that people are holding the status quo. By the time they wrap their minds around action 1, you're on action 4, right? So this feels like I feel like I'm in what Brett Weinstein calls, we're in this Cartesian crisis. I don't know who to trust. I don't know that I can even trust, something I see online anymore. I have to source like every image, every video. I don't know. We don't know who to trust. So we have this breakdown, but it feels multi-pronged, right? So they're coming after our children's identity. They're reshaping words, right? Remember under COVID, we lost the ability, like, what's herd immunity? Oh, vaccine needs to be redefined. Like they're constantly